with them in spite of everything. But back home, that money was paying a defense contractor for his surplus goods and paying him top dollar. And they were calling this aid, foreign aid. Okay. So this is just an example of the sort of backdoor, sleazy, misrepresented things that go on with foreign aid. They set aside $1 billion for new community water systems in Chad. $1 billion, and not a single well gets dug. Hello, not one water well dug. Or look at U.S. aid to Haiti during the big, earthquake and, tsunami and everything that Haiti suffered. The Red Cross was supposed to build 130,000 units, family housing units in Haiti, and they built six. And nobody's watching. Congress just allocates this money, hands it over to USAID. USAID then looks around and sees where it can use this as payola, basically. How they can keep the defense contractors happy. What they can extract out of that poor country that is supposed to be getting this aid. And they just do a runaround. It's like a giant circus or a game of musical chairs. The money goes into one pocket, and then it circulates and gets laundered, and it comes back to another pocket. And often that pocket is a U.S. senator or a U.S. congressman or some pet project in this country that is supposed to be the legacy of one of these congressional demons. But any accountability for how the money allocated gets spent is out the window. There's nobody watching the store. There's nobody doing the least little bit of investigation about how once money is allocated, does it get spent? Number one, does it get spent? Number two, does it get spent for the purpose it was supposed to be spent for? And number three, if it didn't get spent on the purpose that it was designated for, who's at fault? Why didn't it, what happened? Now, these are just very practical questions that anybody would ask, right? And yet it's gone from World War II to today when DOGE raises its hand and says, and the people who are crying and screaming about DOGE are obviously the ones that are on the kickback list because all the rest of us are paying for it. But anyway, DOGE just came out and reiterated again right into the public airwaves that only about 2% of foreign aid money ever allocated by Congress actually gets to the people and gets deployed for the purpose of the allocation. So, as Americans, this should be a big wake-up call. You should all be mad as hell, okay? You should be mad as hell. You should be sending, not nice letters to the Congress, even though we are not under the Congress, right? You can still effectively tell them what you think. The Congress constantly tries to shuffle off its duties and to coerce and acquire more power for itself. Okay, it's a very devious, very nasty organization. So, for example, it politicized the court system even above and beyond the court's secretive mission of extracting money and assets from the people of this country by changing the judge's oath. Back in 1991, they took out specific language that required judges to make their decisions agreeable to the Constitution. So they unblock the door and let the judges do whatever they want. Well, at first, that may seem like a huge step forward for judicial supremacy and a big mark for the judicial branch, right? No doubt that's why the judicial branch accepted that and nobody raised a word. But the fact is that Congress then made the judicial branch a subsidiary of Congress. They took control of the judicial branch of the government by releasing it from obligation to the Constitution. And once they did that, which was treasonous as hell, they came back in and they began using political leverage to force the judges to render decisions however they wanted the decisions to go. And so this is how you get this business of the executive branch wants to do something that is obviously within the purview of the executive branch, right? And suddenly you have all of these judges trying to stop the executive from doing what the executive has a right to do. What's going on here? Well, the judges are over here and they're being blackmailed basically by Congress. Members of Congress are telling those judges, hey, you participated in treason. You accepted this oath, and now you're ours. You now belong to us. You have to do what we say, or all of this is this nice little quid pro quo you've got will go away and all the profit from it. You see, it's extremely criminal and extremely sneaky. Just like I began with the National Security Council. Wouldn't you think that the National Security Council would be populated by Americans? Right?
You would think that.
It's not.
No, it's not.
It's like the UN. You've got people from every other country of the world you can think of sitting on our National Security Council. Why is that? Because after the war, one part of the United States, which was ill-defined, but which we know from past experience and observation, was purportedly the original Federal Republic, was ceded to the UN. And part of what we began discussing last week was the International Organizations Immunity Act, the IOIA. And this basically gave the UN the same sort of carte blanche that the big pharma companies were given regarding vaccines. The UN could come in here and start administering all of our estates. So what you really have to look at here is a long sequence of small nibbles destroying our constitutional form of government in the federal sense, okay? And you've got a whole bunch of very, very criminal, crooked, and sneaky public employees and lifelong bureaucrats that have contributed to this end result. And Congress is right square in the middle of it because Congress has been usurping against the other two branches of the government. Congress has been functioning in an improper way the whole time. And Congress has been extremely negligent. It has not done any due diligence. It has not fulfilled any reasonable expectation of proper administration for decades.
Right. But supposedly, everybody in Congress is also blackmailed.
Well, I'm sure that many of them are. If you go to Washington, D.C., there is no doubt that you are stepping into a snake pit and you are likely to get bitten.
Mm-hmm.
It is a hideous place. It is a hideous, hideous, hypocritical, crooked, dirty dealing, elitist, nasty snake pit.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a person of real character and distinction to rise above that and not get dirtied by it.
Yeah,
You
for
know?
sure. But I think they're all dirty. I think they're all compromised one way or the other. And if you don't play the game, you know, they'll just take you out.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, you get isolated,
mhm,
alienated. You'll be like Ron Paul, the single voice on the floor saying, "What?"
right. But that was the big reveal with the council, because those are all people who are unelected, and they are insiders influencing and directing the results of programs and all of this. They're not accountable to anybody except the people who are blackmailing them, and nobody knows about them.
Right, there's no follow through,
Yeah.
you know? Just like the administrative courts. Congress set up the administrative courts and then allowed them, the different agencies that were formulating the code resulting from acts of Congress to basically dictate what the congressional legislation meant and how it was actually implemented, okay? So you've got these unelected bureaucrats and these unelected corporate tribunals usurping against Americans, misrepresenting Americans, hauling Americans in under false pretenses, and holding them accountable as if they were employees of the government, which is all bull. It's complete and utter, wrong-headed, illegal, unlawful, immoral bull. And they finally had to start dealing with it. You know, finally, the Supreme Court again had to tell Congress that, no, you can't do that. You have to be accountable for your actions. You can't just lay it off on these administrative agencies to develop the code and the law attached to acts of Congress, and then give them the right to prosecute based on their own interpretation of what you meant.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's just, God, it's just such a mess. It's just so slimy. Um,
well, and the Congress has to be accountable about allocations of money. That's another area where they just sloughed off all responsibility for it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, how is that going to be reined in? Because they're not accountable for anything.
Yeah, well, they say they're accountable to the voters once every 4 years, or 2, or 6. I'm sorry, dear. I'm just having a
Oh no, don't be sorry. It's
little
terrible.
coughing fit, but
Yeah,
it
I'm so
makes me
sorry.
angry. And Lysander Spooner, who was an early observer of all this in the time period after the Civil War, up to the beginning of the early 19th century there, or 20th century, then you had this guy named Lysander Spooner. And he very famously said that being able to choose your new slave master once every 4 years doesn't change your condition as a slave.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
Well, I'm just paraphrasing it, but essentially, you know, uh, the falsity of the entire system and the propositions underlying it really are observable. And the problems, once you start grappling with them, do become observable also. And you can follow it all the way back. I mean, you can see where the United Nations became involved. You can see which United States their activities were supposed to um, be directed to. And you can see how all these other things, like the substitution of political party elections for public elections, took root and got started, and how they substituted themselves every step of the way for American institutions, American offices and officers, American parts of our government, like the state of state organizations. They substituted themselves just like cuckoo birds taking over a nest.
Yeah, exactly.
And
And
unfortunately, this is British naval history. This is the way they did things in the British Navy.
yeah, it's a well-worn tactic, and they have continued to implement and implement and implement and substitute, and it's it's out of control.
Well, it is. And, unfortunately, Mr. Trump is working for the Brits, whether he wants to or not. He is the president of their corporation, and they're trying to substitute themselves into another cushy position with trying to say that they're restoring the Federal Republic. They can't restore the Federal Republic. We're standing here flat-footed and saying, no, you can't. You can't possibly. Because British territorials had nothing to do with the first Federal Republic, and they don't have anything to do with our Federal Republic, so you're not restoring anything. You can't restore what you never had to begin with, right? The ones who can restore the American Federal Republic are the Americans. I mean, that's just pure and simple. But they will try to substitute a Federal Republic for the Federal Republic, and they'll think they're very smart and we're very stupid. That's how that will happen.
They've thought that for a long time.
Well, now we're awake, it's a lot more difficult for them. And the more people that we can awaken and get tuned in, the better. Now, I've been very, very busy with lots of things that are not very visible, and I've also been sick. So I haven't been as productive as I normally am in terms of producing articles this week. But I am going to share a video that I found that is arguably the best explanation of the US system and the conundrums that are caused by their substitutions and semantics of any that I've ever seen. Now, bear in mind, the guy who's doing this has a good grasp of the subcontractors, okay? He has a good grasp of the US government. And so everything he says is about the US government, not the American government. And I don't want people to think that, I don't want them to mistake the US government for the American government, because that's what they've tried to do all along, is to kind of switch identities so that the Brits were recognized as the American government when they're not, okay? So we want to make it very clear that this video that I'm going to post or repost is not the American government. It's 100% about the US federal government. But he does a darn good job of showing people how they've used similar names to confuse issues and to impose laws that were never meant to be imposed upon Americans, and they've been implemented and imposed upon us nonetheless. So I will be producing that and getting it out here, hopefully tomorrow.
Good. Yeah. I think that's the Govinder uh, video, right?
No,
Oh,
no. Govinder is with Cal Washington.
yeah, yeah. This is
Well,
something else.
what they're doing is great, except that we did it 10 years ago.
I know, I know. The only thing that I thought was great, I mean, because, you have explained that situation 8 ways to Sunday. And it was just another explanation of what you've already shown. But I thought it was he said it slightly differently, and so you kind of get a little bit of a different perspective. But who are you referring to?
I've never seen the young man before.
Okay.
I don't know him.
Okay.
I watched the video and I realized that, hey, he's using slightly different terminology.
Yep.
Whereas I kind of crack it down to American subcontractor, British territorial subcontractor, and Holy Roman municipal subcontractor. He didn't do it that way.
Okay.
he was explaining it in terms of three different entities called United States. Okay.
Okay.
But he makes that whole thing very clear, and he gives people the information they need to be thinking about this. Because one of the problems that we have is thinking about it in a organized way. Because we have a tendency that when someone labels something, we think that it's only that has that label. And instead, you've got three different entities operating under different law in different jurisdictions, and they're all called United States.
Yep, yep, yep. Well, good. That'll be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that's one of the worst things in terms of people getting confused is the similarity of names.
Totally. We watched the Granabites at our last meeting again, and it's just shocking. You know, you've got these two entities with the same name. How would you know?
The only way you can know is by actually looking at the differences in style. And if it's verbally transmitted to you, there's no way to do that.
No way to do that. Yeah. So lots of shenanigans and lots of substitutions.
Right. Well, what they're trying to do right now is another substitution fraud. And if they continue on and don't come clean about the municipal bankruptcy and don't come clean about the fact that they can't restore a federal republic, only we can restore our federal republic. If they're not honest about this, then how can we trust dishonest people? I mean, it's not something that you can stomach. You can't credibly do something and trust someone when you know they're being dishonest and that they're following a pattern of dishonesty and dishonor that has been going on for 150 years.
Exactly.
Because we've seen this substitution drill before, substituting their courts for our courts, substituting their law for our law, substituting our state of state organizations for their state of state organizations, then trying to substitute state trusts for our states of the union. They've substituted, and substituted. They substituted their president, Abraham Lincoln, who wasn't even eligible to run for a public office in our government. Okay. They substituted their president for our president. This has all been a similar names deceit and substitution scheme from day one. And instead of stopping it, instead of coming clean and starting to do the things that need to be done to provide redress and relief from the continuing crime, what we get is more narratives, more stories.
Right.
And, right now in England, everything is crazy. I don't know how many people are following this, but they're ginning up a tremendous narrative effort to distract the attention of everybody in the British Isles and Commonwealth. The royal family is imploding. And what's being discovered are practices that go back, well, probably to the Roman Empire. It turns out, according to DNA analysis, that Prince Harry is not the son of Princess Diana, even though he is the son of Prince Charles.
Oh boy.
It turns out that Camilla Parker Bowles was not the daughter of the family of the father that was always assumed. She doesn't have his DNA. And it turns out that her son, Tom, isn't her son. And it turns out that her daughter is most likely I haven't seen this announced in an official way, okay? But the diplomatic scuttlebutt is that Camilla's daughter, Laura, is Prince Charles's daughter. So all of this fallout is affecting the entire royal line, all of the lineage. And people have to resort reality. I mean, imagine being 42 years old and all your life, to your own memory, and in fact, of everything that you know, Princess Diana was your mother. And then suddenly someone comes along and says, no, not possible.
I just keep thinking about when you were talking about the royals and the breeding parties that they would have. They'd all show up and then they'd have these breeding parties and create a whole different, mix and match. And that just, for some reason, just keeps rolling around my head.
Well, it's the dark and the light, you see. There are all these secret bastards born on the wrong side of the blanket that are dark, secret members of the royals, right? So Harry was the dark son. William was the light son, okay? William was born within the framework of a marriage, and he was obviously, all his DNA checks out. He is the son of King Charles and Princess Diana. Then you get to Harry. He's the dark son. He's the son of King Charles, which puts him in the running for the throne, right? But he's not the son of Princess Diana. He was born out of wedlock. He's the dark son. And this is a motif that goes all the way back to King Arthur. I mean, and you're talking about 500 AD now, okay? You're talking about the tail end of the Roman Empire. When you're talking about Camelot in France, and you're talking about Powys in England, and you're talking about King Arthur and all of that, you're seeing the struggle between Christianity and paganism, or rather, I should say, Druidism. Okay? So you've got the Christian Queen Guinevere, who is trying to Christianize the wild Irish and Welsh. And so she marries pagan Arthur, and together they're trying to form a Christian government, right? And what happens? Well, Arthur, being pagan, born and bred, goes off the rails and commits incest, which is taboo in the Christian church, with his own half-sister, Morgana. Okay, so then we have Mordred. Mordred is the dark son. He's the bastard born on the opposite side of the blanket, but he's still the king's son, you see. So this is a motif that is has been in the English psyche and in the social, cultural practices all the way back 1,500 years. And we know that. And I've told you about the odd repeat of everything. Everything is recycled, everything is repeated. All of the fraud schemes, if you look, you'll find them, they've already been played out in a different time and place. Maybe a little bit of tweak here, maybe in a different venue, but these are repeat offenses. They're scams that worked at one point in the past, and so they've brought them forward into the future. So it's the same thing playing out now. They've got Prince Harry set up to be the Mordred who destroys the monarchy. And he is washing his hands of the whole mess, which is probably the wisest thing he could possibly do. But
Very
you can see
interesting.
how they set this up so that they have options. They have the light option, they have the dark option. They have the Queen Camilla, who was obviously the dark daughter, right? Because her father turned out not to be her father. It turned out to be another highly, highly ranked British royal. And I would guess Lord Mountbatten, but that's just a an assumption. But anyway, I'm sure it'll all come out eventually. Meantime, Britain is just staggered, you know. The Brits are all standing there going, "What? What?" And furthermore, "What?" You know.
But it's on purpose.
Yes, it's on purpose. They deliberately, purposefully. Um, I'm sure that Diana loved kids, and I'm sure that Harry was a charming little boy, and I'm sure that it was not harming her heart to adopt him, but he wasn't her son. And he was presented to the world as if he was. So the whole thing has to be a little bit crazyville, right? And think about the right wise king of all England. Okay, here's Arthur again, the sword and the stone. Well, he was farmed out too. He was taken as a very young child by Merlin to be raised by a foster father and two older foster brothers. So he had no idea of his lineage either. He did not know that he was the son of Uther Pendragon.
Right.
Okay, so it's the same thing. It's the dark sun, which is a thematic narrative element that pervades all of their history from about the year 500 AD forward. Now, I've been unable to find any references to a similar situation further back. So that particular motif may have just erupted at 500 AD, which is about the same time that the Emperor Justinian and his wife Theodosia were using the Roman convention to create the many different kinds of persons, and using different styles of name to designate freeholders, indentured servants, and slaves. Okay, so all of these things have kind of a nexus. There was a time, just about the year 500 AD, a little bit after Julius Caesar, um, and the reign of the Roman emperors up through from 54 BC up until what was it, 430 or 433, something like that, when the Romans left England. All this stuff was kind of it was percolating, it was fermenting, all right, all in that time period. And what it came down to was Arthur was a pagan, and he lived a pagan lifestyle. When push came to shove, he couldn't fit in the uh, Christian Roman Catholic mold. He was fallible. He ate and drank and caroused and had sex with women outside of marriage, and he was a swashbuckler, and he was a very fallible man. And yet, those who were promoting him, which was the same group of Irish, um, well, not native Irish, but Black Irish, that had supported his father. And so we're given the impression that Arthur was this saintly man, and that he was, wronged
Pure
by
of
his
heart.
wife.
Yeah.
Yeah, that his best friend betrayed him with his wife. Well, there are lots of things that moderate against this, because we know that Guinevere was a very devout woman. We know that she was 30 years older than Lancelot. She was more than competent to be his mother. She could have possibly been his grandmother. So what it really looks like is another slander job against the queen and in favor of the king, and against her kinsman Lancelot, um, who was a boy basically when he came to Arthur's court, and then grew up in this very tumultuous era where Christianity and paganism were going blow to blow. So we're seeing the same kind of thing here, where they're entering a new jurisdiction. They're entering the air jurisdiction, or they're trying to. And they're doing that to escape their crimes in the sea jurisdiction, understand? Because when they change the jurisdiction and they change the titles of their office, they also change the law that they're operating under. So they're trying to vacate the sea jurisdiction, just like they vacated the land jurisdiction, to avoid prosecution. Isn't that sweet?
But that's why all the theater.
Yeah, well, they have to do this in order to escape prosecution. So if they enter the air jurisdiction, they have the protection of ecclesiastical law. They have doctrines of forgiveness that they can access. And they continue to have control of commercial activity, both on the sea and on the land, which is a huge plum. That's a huge prize for these venal villains, okay? So we have to be on our feet and toes and prevent them from achieving their aim. We have to see what their aim is, and we have to rise enough dust and enough outrage to forbid them access to their exit route. Because not only will they not be prosecuted, which they really do in many instances deserve, but they will walk away into a new territory, so to speak, the municipal entity, and they will get away scot-free with all of the money and everything that they hoarded. They will just suck it right into the air jurisdiction, and you won't see a thing. It'll be a sleight of hand because they've built everything on maritime commerce, and they will just sweep that right into the air jurisdiction and pretend that it's land jurisdiction commerce without changing the actual entity at all. They'll still have all of the US corporations. They'll still have all the USA corporations, and they'll try to turn to us and pat us on the head and say, oh, that's okay, dear. Here's your corporation. But it's not ours, it's theirs. See,
Right.
the substitution goes both ways. So it's a very deceptive and very ancient, ugly thing that they're involved in.
Yeah, they're just in essence moving the cheese.
Well, yes, they're moving the cheese in order to protect themselves and their assets.
Yeah.
And they're substituting themselves for us on the
Mhm.
presumption that we're not here.
Mhm.
But we're here, and we've been here a long time. And we need to come forward and make the effort to get more people aware of the situation.
Yeah.
And we have to get more news from the rest of the world. We're being completely cloaked.
Oh yeah.
We're
'Cause
not hearing anything about
no.
what's going on in the rest of the world, and this should always be a big red flag. This should be like the the bullfighter's cape. As soon as we suddenly notice the lack of news from the rest of the world, we should go, something's up. Something's not quite kosher here. What's happening? Okay, and it's at that point that we have to make that extra effort to inform ourselves what's really happening. And that requires us to secure foreign sources that, although they are somewhat malleable, are nonetheless still putting out the news, the real news. I don't know how many of you have noticed this, but if you tune into the nightly news at all, all you'll see are American fluff stories of the same kind that Walter Cronkite used to play just before he would give the body bag count.
Oh, Lord.
Well, I was there, I saw it, I heard it, and so did you probably, but it's all American fluff. It's not, they're not telling you what's going on in the rest of the world.
No.
They don't tell you that India and Japan are gearing up to take over China's role in terms of manufacturing for products for the United States market. But they are. The India is all set to start taking over the microchips and all of that kind of stuff, computer manufacturing. And Japan is taking over the high-end, ultra cutting-edge transportation, satellite, and all that. And they're cutting China right out of the picture. Okay? All this blah, blah, blah about the royal family no longer being the royal family. and the line to the throne being completely kicked out of context and cattywampus. All of that you're not hearing about. And there's just dozens. You're not hearing about the UN and actions that the UN is taking. You're not hearing about World Court deliberations. You're not hearing about International Criminal Court deliberations. You're not hearing about energy resources. You're not hearing about the new technology coming out of Africa, which is just wonderful, where they have cars that run on water. You know, there's all this is going on in the rest of the world, and we're just sitting here like turtles in our shells, dumb and dumber, unaware and unable to properly respond or evaluate because we're kept in the dark, right? I mean, how many of you know that Benjamin Netanyahu went in and hit Gaza again with more bombs than were dropped in the entire Second World War?
I heard he made another strike, but I didn't know that it was that ridiculous. And who gave him the bombs? Was it Trump?
Yes, he got $16 billion in American aid for the defense of Israel in the first 40 days of the Trump administration. And only God knows how much he's gotten since then. So we've been stupidly, let me say, stupidly following the Brit line and giving Netanyahu basically carte blanche to buy any kind of arms he wants and to have the credit to do it. So ask yourselves, why is Netanyahu so damned important? And why is Gaza so important? And why is Israel so important? I mean, 100 years ago, there was no such thing, and we got along just fine. Jews, Arabs, and Christians all got along and lived in that area, and there was no problem at all until the Brits showed up. So it's a British plan. It's a British thing. For whatever reasons, I suspect they were paid a great deal of money by the Bank of England and Jacob Rothschild to create the state of Israel, okay? And no doubt there is still a lot of money available, one way or another, to continue to promote the state of Israel. But why is it so important to these ultra-wealthy people that are obviously not Christians and not even Jews? Why is it so important to them to hang on to this little slice of land in the Middle East? Israel doesn't have any huge oil resources like its neighbors. Israel's a pretty rocky patch of sand and dust and dirt. So the big question is, quite apart from any homilies or, sentiments about, God gave us this land, what's the real deal for these commercial titans and banks? What is Israel holding that is so utterly important when you realize that these men are not religious men? They are 150% commercial. They're into selling their grandmother to the Arabs. That, if they can make a profit at it, it's already done, right? Okay, so these are not men who believe in the Torah. These are not men who even believe in the Talmud. They don't believe in any of that. It's all just a sucker sop. It's a means to an end. It's an excuse. It's a narrative. So what are they really after? What do they really want? And why bomb Gaza into oblivion? There's nothing left. If you've seen the carpet bombing that's gone on there, virtually every square inch that was habitable is bombed. Okay? Hamas was hired by MI6 to go in there and create a false flag attack in Gaza. We know this. The Israel Defense Forces laid down their perimeter defenses, literally, opened the gate wide so that Hamas could do this. We know that. And in return for Hamas killing 1,100 people, which was just brutal slaughter with no sense to it at all, didn't even make a political statement, okay? It was just a hit. Israel has ginned this into an excuse to go in and level the Gaza Strip and kill thousands upon thousands of Palestinians who were living there. It's one of the worst genocides yet. And here's Mr. Trump. Well, the place is all obliterated. Nobody could live there. Let's just move them off to some other place around here somewhere and build them a nice habitat. And we'll just move the hamster farm over here and take over this ruined property for pennies on a dollar and invest in cleaning it up and build 5-star hotels. Is anyone besides me just rocking their head back and forth and going, what in God's name am I hearing out of the mouth of the President of the United States?
Corporation.
And meantime, what's the UN doing? Well, the UN, it finally turns out, realizes that its own excuse for existing is at stake. So the UN gears up and decries the whole situation, says this is genocide, it's illegal, we must take a stand against it, right? Okay, now this is self-interested on their part too, because there have been plenty of other genocides where they didn't get motivated, right?
Well, plus,
a
week ago they tried to enslave everybody.
Right, they didn't make a cause célèbre of the people of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, did they? No, but you see, their excuse for being is that they're supposed to, open up an opportunity to prevent war, right? They're supposed to prevent this sort of thing. And they failed. So now they're beating the drums and they're calling it a genocide, which it certainly is. And they're bringing in all the big guns that they can possibly wrangle to condemn Trump, to condemn his administration, and to condemn Netanyahu and Israel, and just to condemn the whole thing. And if it keeps on going like this, and if the Brits keep doing what they're doing, yes, you know what? The UN is right. Now, the Brits are the ones in bottom of this, just as always. They're at the bottom of the dog pile. They're buying the mercenaries. They're buying the everything they need to promote this whole thing. But it isn't hotels in Gaza. That's not why they want Gaza. What they want to do with Gaza is open up a new Suez Canal. a westward Suez, or call it a west or an east Suez, one the Suez Canal on the west side, which is between Egypt and the Sinai, and a western version that would cut across and connect to the Mediterranean. This is about sea lanes. This is about commerce. And most of all, this is about oil and gas and being able to provide oil and gas to Western Europe and the Mediterranean basin. It has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with culture clash. It certainly has nothing to do with all the poor people that were murdered. And let's just say it, murdered. It has to do with their Grand Slam 100-year plan to create a new canal, basically connecting the Indian Ocean with the Mediterranean. Oh, and develop all of the oil that's in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea basin. Don't forget that, because they already have the development of the refinery system started about 20 miles up the coast from the border with Gaza. So they're going to have this huge, huge industrial development, a huge port facility, a huge, gas and oil extraction and refinery processing center on the Eastern Mediterranean. And sure, they may have five-star hotels too. They may have casinos. They may do all this other happy crap. But this is what it's about. It's not about that. It's not about, oh, gee, isn't it a nice view? It's about controlling commercial transit. It's about having those transfer pipelines in their control. Okay, it's just like J.D. Rockefeller. The same thing with the Panama Canal. They're actively searching for ways to open up another canal in Mesoamerica, where they can use one as a eastbound route and the other as a westbound route. Okay, so they're looking at all these canals and all these canal structures, and they're trying to take over the administration and solidify a position where they are in control of these conduits of commerce, of all the ships that are bringing your supplies, your commodities. They're doing all of this in order to set themselves up in control of the flow of world commerce, just like the Rockefellers set themselves up to control the pipelines and control oil via the pipeline transfer system. They did the same thing with banking. They developed the SWIFT system so that they could, turn the money on and off. Okay, it was pipeline transfer applied to banking. Okay, now they're doing the same thing with worldwide sea lanes and commercial shipping via control of all these canals and the building of new canals. Okay, and you look at this and you have Mr. Trump saying, okay, we're getting rid of the IRS. They have to get rid of the IRS because it was illegal from the get-go. It's illegal to force people to pay a kickback to their employer for the privilege of the employment. It's a system of peonage, and peonage has been outlawed since 1926 worldwide. And the only way they've gotten away with it is by pretending that all the people that they're addressing and snafooing into this system of theirs are not people. They've gotten away with it by pretending that the people are actually corporations, and they could reduce corporations to peonage and enslavement. Okay, so these bastards have done nothing but substitute, use similar names, and create a huge, huge constructive fraud on all of us, everybody. So now they've been caught. And they have to agree that the Internal Revenue Service has to go. Oh, boo-hoo. Bye. And that means that they no longer have a means of restricting the inflation of the Federal Reserve note, which, as I explained last week, the Federal Reserve note value and the rate of its inflation has been controlled by the federal income tax. Okay, so without the federal income tax, there's nothing to keep the Federal Reserve note from inflating, hyperinflating, with absolutely nothing to prevent that end. Okay, so here's the situation. They have to get rid of the Internal Revenue Service, both of them. Okay, and they have to find new means of employing themselves. Okay, they have to find new means to fund their government, right? So they're going to use tariffs as a means to raise money and to stabilize their operations as they're forced to shift from the fiat currency to an asset-backed currency, right? All right, you can see that, right? This is stupid. They can't continue the scam, the IRS scam, and yet they need the money. So how are they going to get money? And all the rest of the world is going, we don't want to play this game anymore. We're all going to asset-backed currencies, okay? So now we have tariffs instead of taxes. We have federal tariffs. And what do tariffs mean?
6 one, half dozen the other.
Yeah, well, here's the big problem. Tariffs are the main instrument, the most traditional instrument of central banks. So if you're trying to collapse an evil and illegal and immoral central bank, like the Federal Reserve, what in the hell are you doing using the main weapon of central banks, tariffs, as part of your economic plan?
Especially given the fact that the Federal Reserve is bankrupt. And so it sounds like they're just doing another substitution fraud and putting lipstick on a pig.
Lipstick on a pig is a good way to put it. The pig is the IMF, by the way, and it's a Rockefeller operation, okay? So think about this. And I've told the story before, but one of my ancestors, unfortunately, he's probably still trying to make up for it, came up with the central bank idea for Frederick the Great. Frederick the Great was a very warped kind of individual. He was a brilliant strategist and tactician and, a military man's military man. But he was a warped man because of things that happened in his own life. And he was somebody who would have kind of mental problems about things, like mustard. He loved mustard, okay? So mustard could be imported to Germany from France all day long with no tariff. But he hated the idea of Germans spending their hard-earned silver for coffee. And so the original central bank was the bank fronted by the Kingdom of Prussia for the purpose of restricting coffee imports to Prussia. It was just his loony dislike of coffee and the idea that his silver was going overseas to places like South America that caused the whole thing. This is what started central banks, was the ability and the desire to manipulate commodities. So what do tariffs really do? Everybody talks about them in terms of money, Everybody talks about them as, obstacles to trade. But no, you're missing the point. The point is tariffs allow you to rig commodities.
And influence markets and
Exactly.
influence trade.
Exactly. So he's using a central bank weapon, the primary, most traditional central bank method of maintaining a commodity rigging system that the central bank will use to manipulate profits for the government.
He came out of the chute with it, came out of the gate with it.
Well, and if you don't realize, if you're just talking about tariffs in terms of, $100 billion worth of imports from China getting charged an extra 10%, that just goes back to the consumer. Doesn't hurt China as long as their price is still within reason. The consumers will still buy it. They're just going to spend more for it. So the tariff is actually coming out of the consumer's pocket. It's not coming out of the government's pocket. Okay, so let's disabuse ourselves of that fantasy. So a tariff is really a tax on consumers. And then they want to levy a 17% sales tax on top of that. So they're aiming at getting, more, just getting it a different way. Okay. And they're crying about central banks, oh, the evils of central banks. Let's get rid of the Bank of England. Let's get rid of Bank of America. Let's get rid of the Federal Reserve. But you notice, you don't hear a word about let's get rid of the IMF. It's not about getting rid of the central bank system. It's about pipelining it and using it for a new system of commodity regulation, otherwise known as rigging. And it's all to be paid on the backs of the consumers, you and me. And so, although we get rid of the goons and the bogus lawsuits and the misrepresentation system that is attached to the Internal Revenue Service, we get rid of that evil, right? And we no longer have to keep all these records, and we no longer have to pay tax consultants, and we no longer have to go through that whole rigmarole. And I'm sure we're all going, but remember, over here on this side, they're going to be tweaking the tariffs. They're going to make sure that you can't get cheap coffee. You can only get expensive coffee. All right. And on this side, they're going to be taxing you when you buy coffee. They're going to employ a 17% sales tax. And all the people who now pay nothing in federal taxes will be paying 17% on everything they buy. Hello?
Just say no.
Hello?
Just say no.
This is a half-baked answer that is completely lacking in disclosure, completely lacking in honesty. I mean, maybe there is some merit in forcing everybody to pay an extra, say, 27% for everything that we consume. Because at least
Actually, I think it might have been good that there's no ships from China, because they're going to stop bringing the cheap China shit over here that nobody needs.
well, they will. But okay, here's the thing. There are a lot of people right now who are suffering and who are on fixed incomes, who don't have the money for dental care, don't have the money for basic medical care. They don't have any extra. At the end of the month, they've managed to pay their rent and buy some soup. Okay. There are a lot of people, a lot of families already on the ropes. And what happens when a loaf of bread now costs 30% more?
Well, in the last year, it's at least 30% more. I mean, we've
Right,
already been in this cycle, and
right.
now they're just going to keep that cycle going. And again, it's more theater, it's more bread and circus. They're pretending that they're going to help the people when they're just going to turn around and steal from them. Period.
Yeah, it's a new way to rig commodities and basically force the people to pay for everything twice.
Yeah. And they're not paying for anything.
Right. Well, what does the government produce? Ask yourself that.
A whole lot of misery.
Right. Do they really protect us and our assets?
Never have. As a matter of fact, they continually uh, rape, pillage, and plunder the people.
So they have not performed their job, have they? You know, and rigging commodity markets using tariffs and then applying a 17% sales tax, uh, that's just more rigging. That's just more arbitrary theft.
And
That's just
raping
more
and
obstruction.
pillaging and
Right.
plundering.
Yeah, it's more obstruction of trade. So, coming from someone whose family created central banks and knows the history of the central banks and why the central banks were created and how central banks use tariffs to rig commodities and to therefore affect economies such that more German gold and silver stayed in Germany, for example, and fewer people became addicted to coffee. You see, there are all sorts of ramifications of manipulating commodity markets, good and bad. And the basic promise or premise there uh, that rigging commodities is necessary, good, and profitable is, central bank liturgy. But the fact is, they're actually designed to artificially inflate the cost of goods and to arbitrarily control access to commodities. And then to add insult to injury, they set up a stock market and let you bet on this rigged situation that they're creating with their banks. So we've just got another generation of the same kind of bullshit that we've put up with for the past 100 years. And, they're being forced to get creative, but if the end result is the same, then nothing has been solved, nothing has been done. You've got a new hole in your pocket. Maybe you've even got a new pocket, but it still has a hole in it. And they're still failing their duty to you, which is to protect you and your assets. And, for all the people out there who haven't paid any federal income tax because they didn't have income that was taxable, uh, you're now going to be paying a 17% sales tax, and you're going to be paying more for the commodity at a baseline because the tariffs are going to raise the prices of commodities, and then the sales tax is going to be added on. So they're basically aiming at getting at least 30% of everybody's income anyway.
We shouldn't have sales tax.
No, there's no reason that anybody should have to pay to make a sale or to buy anything. That is a basic right that they're converting into a privilege in contravention of, what was it, Murdoch versus Pennsylvania. We have a basic right to buy and sell, to trade, and if we want to participate in commerce. We have that right, and it's a right. It's not a privilege. But what they've done is they've created this little system for themselves and said, well, if you want to play in our system, you have to play by our rules. And they've used this as a means to restrict trade, to rig commodity supply and commodity price. And they've been very successful at all of this criminal activity for a long time. But they're really just setting us up for another round, a little tweak, a little twerk, and they're going to do the same exact thing. They're just doing it a different way. So they'll probably collapse the phony stock market because there again, it's obvious that it's rigged. It's obvious that it's arbitrary. And in the end, it's also illegal, immoral, and unlawful.
100%. All right, Anna, we are at 20 minutes, 2 hours and 20 minutes, and we will need to wrap up. But as I said at the beginning, you need some resources.
Yes, we definitely do.
So we've got the new option, Revolut here added.
Yes, Revolut makes it easier. And Cash App, if Cash App doesn't go through, if you try to make a donation and Cash App says, you know, whatever, it didn't go through, then
I understand the Revolut doesn't have the same restrictions that Cash App does.
right.
Okay.
I pay $9.95 or something per month to have the Revolut account, and that's the entire difference.
Okay.
But Cash App, if it doesn't go through on Cash App, just wait a day or two, and it will go through.
Does Revolut charge a processing fee?
That's it, the $9.90 whatever per month.
A month. Oh, okay. Whereas Cash App or PayPal or anybody else takes a percentage.
Yeah, it's a informal cash transfer among friends and family. And I consider all you my friends and my family. If I didn't, I wouldn't have done all this, okay?
Right. And we are very grateful for it. And
So-
my favorite is the PO box, but it's easier for you to use the Cash App and the Revolut because you can just quickly turn around and send funds where they're needed the most.
Yes, and we do have some far-flung projects, you know, thousands of miles away. We have people working on different things. And while we're all volunteers, things like travel, hotel expenses, mailing costs, gasoline for volunteer cars. I mean, there are a lot of things that kind of go into this as material that we need to help our volunteers provide. You know, one way or another, we're asking them to give their skill and their time and you know, to make some significant sacrifices. And so it's only fair that we do our best to make sure that they're covered for their actual out-of-pocket costs. And we do that as much as we possibly can. And we don't always make the goal, but you know, we're trying to make sure that our people are getting something back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're donating valuable time and energy. And we greatly appreciate all the volunteers and all the researchers and everyone who has contributed to the big effort here. So, and of course, we send our love and our gratitude, Anna, for all of your hard work. And I'm so sorry that you're suffering with these terrible allergies. I think a lot of it is just what they're spraying out of the damn airplanes.
Well, I'm happy my immune system is going, no, no, no way. You know,
Exactly.
but yeah, I think it's wonderful that we now have a hotline to report chemtrails and that the chemtrails are being shut down. The pilots are being arrested and the money streams are being tracked. And it won't be too long before we all know who did this and how they operated in the background and what they were actually doing.
I'll look forward to that.
And otherwise, this week, the bank is training coordinators, treasurers, banking committee members, people that are going to be involved in the fiscal affairs of the state to use the new bank system and to understand how credit and asset-backed money interface and how the banks operate. So hopefully that will be a good experience, and hopefully everybody will get tuned up and be able to answer questions for their assemblies and be able to answer with assistance things that come up, all of a sudden you have to reset your password, things like that. Hopefully we'll have those in-house communication links set up so that the people who are being trained right now will be able to, access a specific person or department within the bank to get assistance. So we're trying to set up a, let's face it, rudimentary, but necessary, and it will be very helpful, cadre of people who are able to assist others in their state assembly with bank questions and computer troubleshooting and those sorts of issues in the time period between when it all goes online and actual brick and mortar facilities open up.
We made that announcement on the coordinator call, and so I have a list for you.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so
Good.
I'll be sending that.
Thank you. Yeah, we did the first video, which is just kind of an overview, and now they'll start getting into the actual transfer systems for the credit side and for the asset back side. And it'll make more sense to everybody once they start actually doing like test runs, You get behind the dashboard and you start pushing the buttons and seeing what happens. Well, that's where we're going with that right now, is getting everybody who's in the training group up to speed with how to work the dashboard and what each part does. And once that's done, guess what? We're not waiting for October.
Sounds good, Anna. I know there will be more to come on that. So we look forward to hearing more about Harold and Shannon, and more about all of the many projects that you're currently involved with, including the banking. It's only one of many. And so I sure hope that you get some allergy relief coming up soon, and a little bit of a break for yourself.
Well, I hope so too. It's been tough. It really has. Just one more thought about the bank and the online interface and the online accounts. The passwords are exceedingly sensitive. So they have to be with the right upper lower case. And you have to be careful not to get any extra spaces in the password.
Yeah.
So you need to be very careful. If you're like me and you fumble finger typewritten things sometimes, just be really careful that you got all excess spaces, dots, or anything else out of that password before you hit the button. Because it's hair trigger. If there's anything amiss with that password, you're going to flag it and you'll probably be blocked and you'll have to get a new password and save yourself the irritation, save the extra strain on the bank staff. Just be very careful when you enter your password that there's no extraneous stuff in it, that it's the right upper lower case, and be careful when you input that.
Thank you for that guidance.
Yeah, it will save a lot of people a lot of frustration.
For sure.
And I've had a lot of questions about, where are the distributions? Well, the distributions had to be, what's the word? They had to be automated, okay? They had to be streamlined so that instead of doing updates and distributions by a system of tranches, where, first one group, then this group, then that group, they had to get it to a point where they could just hit one button and broadcast to all the different accounts. And so that has been taking some extra time and effort on the part of the IT staff and the bank administrators. But in the long run, if you consider that this is scalable so that it can reach everybody on the planet, we needed that kind of simplicity and universality in order to continue to make the distributions to larger and larger and larger groups, right? Because it's a big deal to go from 70,000 to 320 million. And until the actual countries start getting their own banks set up so that there's a national bank that can take over the retail side of this, we're going to be the only ones that are really set up and competent to be able to provide relief to people in places like Ireland. Now, they'll be getting Irish money, right? But somebody has to be able to reach them. And along with all of the many other burdens that Global Family Group has had to bear, making that commitment to help our neighbors and to help get them set up so that they can have their own bank and operate their own lawful system again it's a biggie. But there is no other way to do it. Not and be fair, not and be honest, and not and be kind. We could just turn our back and say, well, we had to fight through this ourselves. But because our country was used as the pirate base for all of this, I cannot turn my back as a fiduciary on those who suffered the same evils and suffered it under our name. You see, the pirates used us as a facade, as a storefront. And we wound up having a control over the theft, even though we didn't know about it. Okay? So now when it comes to, returning money to Ireland, there has to be a mechanism to do so. And I'm just using Ireland as an example. There has to be a mechanism for us to reach places like Mozambique and South Africa. And so the Global Family Bank has shouldered a great deal for humanity. And they've made doing this possible. So I just want you all to understand that the immensity, the staggering immensity of the job of providing retail banking services to the planet. And also understand that Global was never intending any such role. It got pushed into the gap. So everything that you're seeing for the 50 states will eventually be made available to the Canadian provinces, to Mexico, to China, because there's no way out of our responsibility for seeing this through and correcting it. We were left, trying to imagine it as a giant slush pile. Or imagine that every kid in 4,200 schools brought their winter mittens and threw them in a big pile in the school gymnasium. How do you get the mittens back to the right kid? That is the mind-boggling proposition that we've had to face.
Yeah, it's just, it's an enormous fraud, to be sure.
It is. Well, but don't let your hearts be troubled. Don't let this weigh you down. when what is true comes, what is false must pass away. And so we're going to see a lot of false things passing away. We're going to see attempts by the old con men trying to con us again and substitute another rigged system. We're going to see attempts of the old con men trying to substitute their government for our government. This is predictable, okay? So just don't be dismayed when you see it happening. Keep alert, keep your Shinola sensors on, do everything that you can to protect yourself and your family. I advise keeping a low profile. If it does come down to some sort of corporate takeover, which is one of the options that might happen, your peace flag, even though a lot of the military remain ignorant, your peace flag is an emblem that can protect you from legal suppositions, and it will serve you well. So if you don't have a peace flag, please make the effort to get one. If you don't have a way to display a flag, get one of the little decals or labels, like for on the car window or something like that. Put it up in a window or on the door or close to the threshold, so that it's clear who you are and what your standing is, because we are non-combatants. We have always been non-combatants, and if we do have like military raids, that sort of thing, ICE breaking down the door to search for illegal migrants and that sort of thing. This is your way of providing them due notice.
Makes sense, Anna. Thank you for that reminder. And we do have our store where you can get stickers. You can get a whole sheet of stickers, and flag stickers. So
Right.
for like $5 or something. I don't know.
It's a cheap bit of insurance.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always good to fly your flag, no matter what.
Yes, it is. And when we proclaim that we're Americans at peace, that tells all the varieties of U.S. citizens to stand down, and that we are owed our constitutional guarantees, and that if they trespass on us, they are in a whole different venue and world than they are when they're trying to clean up their own messes.
Good point.
Okay. Well, I think I remembered everything I needed to remember.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Hugs and kisses and God blesses to everybody.
Take good care, Anna. I hope you get some relief soon.
Yeah, I'm beginning to come back. I'll be fine.
Have a wonderful week.
Good night, Terry.
Good night,
everybody.
God bless.
You too.
All right, folks, there we have it. Thank you so much for joining us. I send my love and my gratitude to each and every one of you. Have a wonderful week. God bless and good night.